The Pistons lose 25 straight. This is a number in 2023 that seems impossible with the amount of three-pointers everybody takes. Just 3-point variance alone, it's almost like flipping a coin 25 times and getting heads 25 times seems as realistic to me. And yet they did it. And looking at the schedule, this might keep going. And nobody's talking about this, but we're talking about it now.
I don't see where it's going to end. I mean, and tonight was the place where it would have ended, right? I mean, I looked at it when I was on the show this afternoon, Bill. Lauri Markkanen's out. Jordan Clarkson's out. Keontae George is out. Taylor Horton-Tucker is out. This team is playing a back-to-back. I think it was their 5th game in 7 days. So It was the easy end to the streak. You don't win this one. I don't know where it ends. And now the pressure probably starts to build.
So they have home and home at Brooklyn, then home against Brooklyn are their next 2. Then they play at Boston, home Toronto, at Houston, at Utah, at Golden State, at Denver, at Sacramento. Basically, it's got to be one of these 2 Brooklyn games, unless it would be the upset of the century. Because the problem with this team, they're 30th in every 3-point category. So it's not like, they're not going to shoot 22 for 45 one night from 3, which means they're going to have to beat you with talent, and they don't have any talent. And they just get their asses kicked over and over again.
Yeah, and like where are the wins coming from? Because the schedule has been relatively easy. I think it gets a lot harder as the season goes along.
Right.
And like think about some of the teams that they've lost to. So you lose to the Jazz, which is a skeleton crew tonight. You do that at home. When they're well rested. Minnesota's well rested. Utah's not. You already lost to Portland at home where you blew a big lead. You lost by like 19 points to Washington at home. So like who's left? You're running out of bad teams because there's like 6 or 7 bad teams. There's like 3 or 4 historically bad teams. Then there's like 20 good teams. So if you're not beating the 3 or 4 bad teams at home, you're running out of wins and possibilities.
And even as this was going on, and once this got into the 20s, I didn't do a podcast segment about it, but it felt like it was a bigger story than maybe it should have been. I think one of the reasons it wasn't was because there's no smoking gun to point to here where you can say, this is why they're in this mess. Like this is a team that picked 1st, 5th, and 7th the last 4 years, right? But there's a little bit of bad luck with some of those picks. There's no terrible trade. You can't point to one sort of tipping point moment. It's just kind of bad. And what's crazy is if you go through the Pistons just in general, so they made the Eastern Finals in 2008 and they lost to the Celtics. And that was kind of the end of the Rashid.
Yeah.
I don't even know that whole crew that was done. 2009, they lost in round 1. Since then, they've made the first round twice. Since 2009. Think how long that is. That's year 1 of Obama. They've made the first round twice. They lost both of those. What do you think their highest win total was for a season since 2009?
Oh, my God.
Number of wins. What would you guess?
I'll go 500, so I'll go 41.
All right, well, that was their second highest. That was in 2019. They won 44 games in 2016. They've lost 50-plus games 8 times. This will be the ninth time this year. How many All-Stars do you think they've had since the 08-09 season?
Oh, boy. Let's go 2.
3. Iverson, Drummond made it twice, Blake Griffin in 2019. Do you think they've lost the most games of anyone in the league since the 2009-2010 season? Is that a yes or a no?
I mean, and think about this, because Philadelphia spent like 5 years losing on purpose.
Intentionally
losing. And that's the concerning part about this team, is they're not intentionally losing. I'll go with yes, I guess.
All right, the answer is yes. They're the only team with 700 plus losses over that stretch. Sacramento's 2nd, Minnesota's 3rd, Orlando's 4th, and Charlotte's 5th. And the reason I mention this, Sacramento, they've turned it around. They have some hope, right? They made the playoffs last year. It's not as great this year, but at least they're above average. Minnesota, we watched them tonight. I think that team's a legitimate finals contender. Orlando, feeling great.
Yep.
Franz and Paolo looking good. Arrow pointing up. They got some moves to make. They might be a sneaky 4 seed possibly. And even you look at Charlotte, like they have LaMelo and they have Brandon Miller. Like those are at least foundation pieces for something going forward. I look at Detroit. Russillo and I talked about Cade. Would you trade him now and just try to do the complete rebuild? Is he a keeper? I guess Cade is the keeper on this team, and I'm not even positive he's a keeper.
Well, you're mentioning like all these picks. Like, think of the roster, and this might be the issue as well. Is they didn't draft like, or they don't have anybody on the roster that like grew up almost as a role player or came into the league thinking I got to be a role player. Like Cade's the number 1 overall pick, right? Marvin Bagley's number 2 overall. James Wiseman's 2 overall. Jaden Ivey's 5th overall. Asar Thompson's 5th overall, who I actually do really like.
I like
He's going
him
to be a
too.
winning player.
I agree.
Killian Hayes, 7th overall. Kevin Knox, 9th overall. Alec Burks, even a while back, 12th overall, Jalen Duren, 13th overall. So I think that's 9 guys that got selected within the lottery. They got 9 lottery teams. Can you think of another team that's got 9 lottery guys on their roster and they're still this bad?
No, and they were shopping for kind of failed lottery picks. They were at Costco, walking down the aisles, grab. Oh, is that Marvin Bagley? We'll take him. Oh, Wiseman, we'll take him. I really like Thompson. This is the worst kind of team for him to be on, right? This is there's no cohesion in this team at all. All the stuff that he does is stuff that, is going to work the better the team is. I still believe in him. He would, if I had to do a keeper draft for this team, I might actually take him over Cade because Cade's got that big contract coming up. This is year 3 for him. You can start thinking about an extension before year 4. I mean, this is the problem with the NBA right now, right? The Bulls are in this situation now with Levine where they're like, all right, here, take it. And you literally can't trade him now. So I don't know what the answer is with that. And then on top of it, they just spent $80 million on their coach and he just lost 25 straight. And, if it was year 5 for him, you'd be like, Monty's going to get fired. But he just started. So I don't know what you do with that either.
Yeah, you're not eating $78.5 million. You would think that you have to do something. And I know Troy Weaver signed that extension last offseason. I think that they said was
he earned
secret.
it. Yeah, it's a great job by Troy.
So he's going to stay unless they want to eat that money. Monty's going to stay. You'd think they trade somebody just to make a move, or he goes in like Wick Rusbeck last year. I think when Miami was up 3-0 and he started throwing chairs and screaming at the players. At least something that Tom Gores has to do because you're embarrassing the team. And the concerning part is, like you said, it's been 15 years since their last playoff victory. And Bill, think about the other teams that have lost more in a row, right? So I think it's just the 2011 Cavaliers, the 2016 Sixers. The Sixers were losing on purpose, right? So, there was a reason behind that. The 2011 Cavaliers really didn't have time to pivot off of LeBron leaving, right? Because that kind of came as a surprise. And they're like, okay, where do we go from here? Detroit's had all this time to build this thing. And Troy Weaver's been there for a pretty good amount of time. And there's still really no direction.
Tom Gores bought the team in September 2011 for $325 million during that stretch when there was just a bunch of teams available. And basically, everybody who bought an NBA team in the beginning of 2010s, late 2000s got an awesome deal.
Yeah.
He is the worst owner just from a success standpoint. This is now a 12-year run of abject failure, but never gets mentioned in the conversation for, hey, who's the worst owner in sports? Just from a win-loss record, it's Tom Gores. I think you could put him even against the Cleveland Browns owners and people like that.
Maybe the one organization that's gone down since then in money. I don't know how much he could sell it for. What's the? I'm joking, obviously, but I mean, it's been that bad, and I don't know where it ends. And is Monty even going to make $1 million per win? Are they going to get to 13 wins? That's Jesus. What he's making.
Well, I mentioned this 2 weeks ago. When you have a bad team and then you overpay your coach, sometimes that's the worst thing you can do because then he feels like he's invincible. And then the players are like, well, I don't really like playing for this guy, but he's not going anywhere. But the problems are deeper where they built this team. It's like a bunch of guards, right? They took lottery picks on Killian Hayes, Jaden Ivey, and Cade Cunningham 3 of the last 4 years, all of whom seem like they need the ball to succeed. So just fundamentally, that doesn't work. Then they have all these big guys in a league where you need a lot of shooting. They traded Sadiq Bey last year for Wiseman, even though they already had Jalen Duren. It feels like they're putting together a fantasy team more than a real team. But when you go through all the weird thing, and this is why I think people haven't really talked about them that much because there's not a lot to say. You go year by year, and you can kill them a little bit, but you can't go, oh my God, that's the stupidest thing.
Yeah.
Like in 2020, they took Killian Hayes 7 and Halliburton went 12th. Well, a lot of teams passed on Halliburton, A. B, a lot of people like Killian Hayes, like KOC, who I think's done a really good job in the draft for us. He thought that was possibly the best prospect in the draft. And obviously, in retrospect, Halliburton was the pick. I really liked Halliburton that year. 21, they took Cade Cunningham, the first pick in the draft. I was a Mobley guy that year, but most people were Cunningham guys. Nobody was like, what are you guys doing? That was the consensus number one. And then in 22, when they took Ivy at 5, nobody was going nuts about that. I mean, you could look from a roster construction angle. Shaedon Sharpe went 7. Dyson Daniels went 8 or 9, and Sohan went right after that to the Spurs. And you could say, well, why didn't they take a swing guy? I think that if you're going to kill them on anything, it's probably that, thinking Ivy and Cade could play together, because they can't.
Yeah. But even if you think back to that draft, right, and I remember I was there covering it, everybody thought that Jaden Ivey was going to go 4th, right? And they kind of killed Sacramento because Sacramento went with Keegan Murray, and that's turned out to be a really good pick because that kid's taken off right now. But, so he kind of slipped, and people thought he was a top 4 player. It was pretty clear that it was going to be Chet Paolo and Jabari Smith as the front 3. But then you thought, hey, a little gap, it's Jaden Ivey. Then it's Keegan Murray. Sacramento was Keegan Murray. And, so I wouldn't kill Detroit on that either. And I actually like Jalen Duren. I mean, I think Jalen Duren's going to be a really good player. You can't kill him for Cade because we all would have taken him number 1, or Mobley. And then you can't kill him for Asar Thompson, who I think is going to be a good guy. Yeah, so there's not individual years where you can kind of go at him and say, this is a bad move, that's a bad move. It's just, I guess, the pieces that fit together. And that's the other thing, Bill. Just like for a second, think back to the 2000 I guess 16 team that lost the 26 games in a row, which it looks like they're going to do right now. Like Ish Smith, Jahlil Okafor, Nerlens Noel, Robert Covington, Hollis Thompson. Those are the guys that had the most minutes for Philadelphia that year. You can tell why that team lost so many games in a row. I like this roster a lot better than that Philadelphia team or that Cavaliers team that lost 26 games in a row. The talent here, they shouldn't lose 25, 26 games in a row.
I agree with you. Bogdanovich missed a bunch of games, and he's their best shooter, but he's back now. You go back and you look at some of the trades they made. They traded Kennard and Bruce Brown and some seconds for Sadiq Bey. They traded for Jeremy Grant, right, from Denver, and then they paid him. They traded Christian Wood in a second for Isaiah Stewart. These moves aren't bad. Getting Bagley and then paying him was probably a mistake, because I'm not sure what world Marvin Bagley is, a $13 million a year guy. Yeah. They traded Jeremy Grant, who I think has some value, for a $25 pick that will be in the bottom of the draft. They signed Olynyk, then they traded him for Bogdanovich, and then last year they held on Bogdanovich instead of trading him, and I think he would add value. They traded Bey for Wiseman. This summer they used their cap space to trade for Joe Harris. You go individually, and it's like none of these moves are like a catastrophe. But the team that they built, the roster, and how it makes sense with each other, I don't know if they should have lost 25 games in a row.
No.
But it's clearly the worst team in the league. Even the Wizards, you can watch the Wizards, and there's going to be a night where Kuzma and Poole are feeling it, or they'll get the random Corey Kispert game. I think it'd be really hard for that team to lose more than 12, 13 in a row. If you can't shoot, it's a little more realistic to me, right?
Yeah, especially, and Cade's taken a ton of shots, right? And he's been really inefficient. So that's another issue, is your best player is, and Bogdanovich still might be their best player at this point. He struggled here tonight, which is one of the reasons they lost. And that's probably the one move that I would criticize them a little bit with, is Bogdanovich last year, when he had a ton of value and might have been able to get 2 first-round picks. I would have maybe parted with him last year. And I had said that throughout the entire process.
Yeah, you want to get worse, not kind of tread water somewhere near the middle. And I think Bogdanovich had real value last year. I think he has value right now.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to lose 25 consecutive games, what's the point of having him on the roster? If you're going to win 6 games all year, what's the point of having him on the roster? Get somebody that's going to help you in the future. Because, again, Bogdanovich, as soon as he can get the heck out of there, is going to get the heck out of there.
I threw this at Russillo on Tuesday about the possibility, should they just trade Cade? Do you just do a full reboot, see what you got with Jaden Ivey? Maybe give him the car keys. I was thinking about the Spurs for Cade, and they have 1 million picks. And is that even realistic? Because we usually don't see in this day and age teams giving up on young point guards like that. We saw it with Halliburton and the Kings. But that was pretty unique circumstance,
Yeah.
right? They had a clear Fox Halliburton. They kind of had to pick one of them. But for the most part, you don't really see it. But this is the NBA we grew up with, right? We watched in the 90s. We would watch these high lottery picks just get traded after like a year and a half. I would think about it if I was them. I think it might be a change of scenery time for him because with the extension coming, you just can't extend somebody who can't win anything for you.